Hello and welcome. What we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at the language of filmmaking. Now, the first question you're going to be asked is, what is the language of filmmaking? What makes it different from just reading or studying a normal text? Well, quite simply, a film isn't a text as, well, it isn't using writing, it's using images as its text. And by that definition, it basically forms its own language because it's not using words as such, it's using images as its language, as its grammar, as its way of speaking. So the best way to look at a film is sort of like a language or dialect. And what we're going to look at is we're going to look at some various things in filmmaking and the process of filmmaking, which is like constructing sentences and paragraphs like you would if you're writing about something. And it certainly helps when you're looking to respond to a text, to actually have a look at what the language and dialect of a film is. And when you obviously compare it to text-based works, then you have to look and think, okay, what makes this different? What methods of storytelling have been changed because of the fact that we can't just write about something happening, we have to show it. And we have to show it in such a way that an idea comes out in such a way that it moves people just the same as if it was written in a story. Now, you may be thinking, well, lots of films have basically replaced story writing, that books are dying and people are watching films instead because all you have to do for a film is just sit down and enjoy yourself. You can hang out with friends. It's not like a book where you have to sort of sit by yourself and read page after page after page and go on for hours doing so. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what about that is different? Well, there is a lot about it that is quite different. And you need to actually look at the way that it's all sort of put together. The way it's put together through things like visuals and through sound and through editing as well. Now, these all things don't work in isolation, they work together. So you combine all these things together as a big group. And that's basically what the language is. And they work together to establish mood. So that feeling that you get when you watch a film. So if you're watching a horror movie, it's that thing that makes you scared. If you're watching a romance film, then it's that bit that makes you feel all, I would say, nice about yourself. If you're watching a comedy, it's the bit that makes you laugh. All those things. They are a means of representation as well. So they're a way of showing things that you probably wouldn't normally see in an older style or basically a book. So it's doing all the things a book would do, but just doing it in a much quicker form, but also in a way which is visual and moving, and basically is very dynamic as compared to a film, compared to a text, which is static and set in one particular time frame. Learning the language of film is important. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, is there an actual sort of vocabulary? Is there a set of words involved? Well, yes, there is. There is a little bit of one. And it helps you to understand the meaning, the ideas that are basically being created by a film. So to break it down really into bits, what you're doing is you're looking at how each frame is being put together. And that's what we're going to look at now. We're just going to have a quick look at frame by frame. Okay, so what am I doing each frame of a film I'm looking at? Obviously, you won't be slowing it down to every single frame of the film and analyzing each one of those. That would be rather silly, actually. What you're doing is you're working out how each part of the film is structured and arranged in such a way that together as pieces, they start to make up the meaning of what you get in the film. So they're the links which unite each frame from beginning to end. And that's what the language of film essentially is. It's how all those frames together communicate. So you think of it this way. You think of each frame as being like a word. each second of film is like or each fraction of a second of film is like a word. Each scene is a chapter. So at the end of a scene, you've got the end of a chapter. And the whole film is essentially your book. So that's the way of looking at it if you were to go back to the old method of looking at it from a storytelling perspective and from a writing perspective. Now, as a film is doing the exact same thing with pictures and with sound and with other things, then what it's doing is it's basically replacing the words with similar images which represent what the words would do. And a combination of these visual techniques go together to basically make your whole finished product. And the way that you'll look at it studying film is pretty much the exact same way as picking a chapter in a story and focusing on that. So you just focus on a scene, something really simple like that. And that is the best possible way for you to start looking at films, rather than just going through and trying to write down each line, which is very, very difficult and also makes it rather hard to keep up with the story, first of all, but second of all, if you're trying to write down everything, it's very hard to get to the bits that really matter. Okay, so let's look at the film language. What is it? As I said before, it doesn't involve reading. So you'd be going, yay, no reading, which usually is the case. And that is a good and bad thing. However, it's mostly a bad thing. I'll just explain why. And now the reason why it's a bad thing is because of the fact you watch it for enjoyment all the time. You're used to watching films for enjoyment as a social thing, to hang out with other people. So you're not really in the habit of a film equals study. And so when you have to make that jump to psychoanalyzing films, which is basically what you're doing when you're studying them, you're complaining about basically what most students complain about, which is that studying a film ruins them. But that's because most students, when they study film, is they completely take the wrong approach. They try and write about every single bit of the film, which is, again, it's pointless. You don't want to be doing that. I can tell you for a fact, when I study films, I don't try and remember everything that happens in every scene. I have a DVD player that will help me with that. And that's pretty much what you'll be doing as well. What you're really doing is you're working out how they function. In other words, you're sort of looking at things behind the scenes a little bit. You're working out what the director chose to do and what the sound guy chose to do. So if you're looking at the language, you're basically looking more about how films are made. And that's more interesting. I find that if you look at it that way, as opposed to just studying them for the hell of it kind of way, then you actually find it's a lot more fun to have a look at films more closely. And if you actually have an interest in filmmaking, whether you want to pursue it as a career once you finish school, or if you just have an interest in films in general and TV shows and you have your favorites, then it's a great way to learn a little bit more about it and to keep, participating in watching the film even after you've watched it, is to work out how it was made and how everything was put together. And you will find that that's more fascinating than trying to remember each line in each scene. And then you'll find that the meaning comes out of the way that the film is made, rather than having to find it through a couple of hours of film. Okay, let's just divert a little bit and we'll go on to symbols. Now, immediately people groan when they hear symbols. They go, oh God, gotta look for symbols. It's really boring. So, why? Well, basically, it's because why films use it, first of all, and they use it because they don't want the entire story to be filled with dialogue or explosions, basically. Now, being symbolic doesn't necessarily mean, as I said, that they're trying to make it deep and meaningful. They are just basically trying to tell a story. So they're not always deep, meaningful, and artistic symbols. They can be actually really blatantly obvious sometimes. And they're things that you would actually just really see and not really think about and completely glance over it. When really, if you just think about it a little bit, then what you find is you've actually got some symbols you can talk about. So let's go through some common examples. Children. You often see kids in films, and generally they symbolize something like innocence or add a little bit of a purity to a scene. So at the end of the day, children run up to the hero and give him a big old hug. And that is basically, it's symbolic of the kinds of actions that they do, and that by helping save children that they are doing something good. Maybe the gaze off into the distance, like our lonely little cowboy over there, for when you want to appear deep and thoughtful. The big jazz band, so an old style party is alive and kicking. So if you see an older style film, maybe not so much a newer one, but one of the older ones, then you'll often see these big jazz bands starting up, and then that's cue for a big party scene. We've got something like an eagle. Majestic and powerful. The rusted out car, so for our really broke hero at the beginning, so he drives up in his car and he gets out of it and bits fall off it. That's a symbol as well. And they're really basic, broad ones, and you'll see them all the time in films. I see them all the time. And I don't think of them as deep and artistic symbols. I just think of them as parts of filmmaking, parts to show what's happening. Okay, let's have a look at some more significant ones. Ones that stand out a little bit more. And these are the ones that have a little bit of metaphor behind them. So they also are the ones that give your film analysis a little bit of depth. Now, why would you want to add a little bit of depth to your filmmaking, you might ask? Well, or to your film analysis. And basically by adding a little bit of depth to it, by analyzing what certain symbols in a film means, then what you're doing is you're basically decoding the filmmaker's art. And it's no different really from working out what a metaphor is in a story. So you don't have to over-analyze it too much. You can just basically look at the direct meaning sometimes. In times where you can't, for instance, the unicorn in the film Blade Runner, so if you're one of those people who has seen it, it's a HSC text, then what is happening with that symbol is it's not given a direct meaning, which means it's up to the audience, it's up to you who are watching it to really interpret what it means. So, in other words, basically, that symbol there, that unicorn, is something which is, I guess, a twist on the ending, something which gets people to think about what it means and are able to draw their own conclusions about parts of the film based on that symbol, which is used throughout the film. So what symbols should I write about them? Well, really it depends. It depends what you're actually trying to get at with your discussion. They don't always have to be deep and significant, so don't worry if you can't find anything. However, if you can find them, excellent, great, go for them. That's what you really should be doing. But as I said, it's not absolutely essential to find the really deep ones all the time. And there will be often films which don't really have a lot of them anyway. And you can actually have a much better discussion by just really talking about some basic ones. And things that help you to develop some deep discussion. And you can take some really broad symbols and really just interpret them. I mean, it's up to your interpretation anyway. So that is the big thing about it, is every symbol that you see has to be interpreted in your own way anyway. You can't just say there's a symbol of a snow globe. You actually have to go in and say, okay, well, what does it mean? What does it say about the film? And that's mainly the purpose of what you're looking at when you're looking at filmmaking. So that's basically it for the language of film. So in this film, we've just sort of had a very quick look at the sorts of things that a filmmaker, a director, or a person who works on a film, it is usually a team effort, will do to bring out the meaning of what is written in the film script, and doing it in such a way that people at home or people in the cinemas who are watching the film can have a whole experience of film come across to them in a way that the director and the original filmmakers intended. And so it's not lost as well, which is always the big thing, is you don't want any meaning to be lost. So that's it for now. Until next time, I'll see you later.